which is their pockets. And
For the second UAL So White meeting, NUS Black Students Campaign Officer joined a discussion on BAME attainment and retainment in the academic institution.
Well, what I like to do is ensure that institutions don't just fixate on narrowing the gap, because you can narrow a gap and you can find like that one barely exists in certain departments, for example, or schools or whatever, but there's still like institutional racism is still rampant and people are having horrendous experiences. So I like to say that this is one of the many factors that we look at in relation to how our institutions are racist, how they're not essentially built to support us. So the things that I like to refer it back to is student experiences. So whilst the data is important, it has to always be alongside the qualitative information of like what our experiences are and why it is that like we feel marginalised within the space and essentially oppressed as well. Academic underrepresentation is again, institutions will kind of pull a Baroness Amos out of the hat and say that's it, we've sorted it, we've got a black woman at the top, like now our institution is good. And it's just like, and part of it then, if the problems are perpetuated, it's on her. Put a black person there and she didn't solve it. It's always important to correlate the two of like the experiences of black staff, academic and non-academic staff and students. It's really important that it is a coalition in terms of those experiences and generally that all efforts are both staff and student-led. I think that's where we've seen the most impact.
When you have courses, like you said, with BAME members of staff, remember these staff they're disempowered. They don't have the authority to make those structural changes to their courses. Like they have a course they need to deliver and they don't have any authority to make like systematic changes in that course that can really change BAME, the experiences of BAME students. So like, especially like, that's why like what you said about Baroness Amos. The truth is we can get 100, 300, 400 black staff, but if those staff are not empowered, then we're still gonna have an attainment gap.
The problem of the gap has existed since Windrush and we still haven't solved it. Why? Because you will not look at the fundamental structures of your institutions and the only ways in which to do that is to review everything at the same time, but also put in place certain solutions, so like make interventions that will interrupt the way that the cycle usually runs. So things like having black people at the table that are active in the kind of attempts, in the efforts to decolonise education, but beyond that, them also feeding into like the trainings that take place. So all equality and diversity training is pretty much inadequate. It's about like how do you address your oppressive thoughts and how do you keep it in order to like keep your job safe and not create ruckus in the classroom or spaces of education. It's not really about like also understanding your own privilege and power within a certain space. The structural barriers as opposed to like the student that is experiencing problems within the classroom, refuting like deficit model based solutions like mentoring programs that again problematize students, because it's all about like cutting the black person out of that space, fixing them and then reinserting them into what you're presenting to an otherwise like utopic perfect space and system that we're just not like good enough to succeed in. It's actually that other space that needs to be reviewed.
Always, 9 times out of 10, any course that I've done, or it always starts with the Romans and the Greeks. Like, and that's bull, and that's how you feel empowered as well. It's about knowing like actually I can call that out because what you're saying is not true.
So is it like, in terms of the curriculum and subjects and stuff, it's about moving it from like a Eurocentric point of view, and then but also in terms of school, getting more like diversifying the staff.
Yeah, liberating again.
Going back to all the things that you've said, I mean, I think they're all really, really important points, right? But when you've got an institution like this that just looks at your face and thinks, well, you're going to be stupid, I mean, I don't know, how do you kind of combat that kind of?
You start by asking for conversations. You're like, okay, let's sit around the table and let's talk about this. There's a problem. That doesn't work. Then you meet them with fierce opposition, with, like I said, ruckus and threats. This is going to damage you. We will continue going to the press about this. We will partake in direct action. We will, you know, and this will not help your case. Like, if they only care about their reputation and bringing in the money, then your threats should be directed at that. There is always a way, because also they want to often instantly demonize you by saying, you didn't even ask for a meeting with us, and it's just like, you've had this data for so long, you haven't even done anything. Even if people want to go straight to like the point of threatening, they're very much entitled to do so. But I think, and building a base even of support outside, which BSC and other groups would support in doing so. And I think now is the time to strike, because with everything that's going on in relation to Roads Must Fall, why is my curriculum white? It is now, and even like, you know, ministers looking at the attainment gap, I think it's now that like we can push the conversation to the point where we need it to be, and not at the point of like compromise. We don't want to keep going through this, and we don't believe that anybody coming up after us should. So
Find out more about the UAL So White campaign at ualsowhite.tumblr.com.
What needs to change, irrespective of whether there's contention or opposition, that's always going to exist. We're trying to liberate, so it only makes sense in this society that there would.